Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Lost One podcast. Joining me today, we have Shoshima 1016.
Yo.
And that's it. Samurai was back, and now he's gone again.
Yep.
So, life and work come up, and
I'm all you're stuck with.
yeah, which, God help me. God save this podcast.
Oh, that's what my wife says every night.
No, but in all seriousness, welcome. And Shoshima, it is good to have you on here. Thanks for being here. Mm-hmm. We're going to be talking today, we're going to continue our Lost in the MCU, and which, surprisingly, we've had a lot of episodes of this without Samurai here.
Yeah.
He's missed like all of Phase 2, which might be for the best in some cases.
Yeah,
although he was here for, I think, our Thor the Dark World one, so...
Yeah, he was here for the one stinker, at least.
And Iron Man 3, I think, too. So he
Actually, he was here for only the stinkers.
Yeah, yeah.
Get wrecked, nerd.
He missed Winter Soldier and he missed Guardians. And now he's missing what I personally consider the stinker of the Avengers films. Mm-hmm. But a stinker of an Avengers film is like saying a bad...
like a bad Cars. It's still an 87.
Yeah, it's still a bad Cars movie. It's like, oh, it's still good. Hi, Tanner. Tanner is saying hi and whining at us. Hello. Come here, bud.
It is the Commander Tanner.
Yeah, making a rare on-camera appearance. Come here, boy. Hey, come here. Are you really going to make me edit all this out? No? Okay. Good boy. Come here.
You can't make him edit. That would be him doing something on this podcast.
Yeah, we can't have that. That's illegal. But anyway, yeah, so we're going to talk Avengers Age of Ultron today. And this is not the final movie of Phase 2.
No. Which
was a very surprising announcement, I think, when it was first made. Mm-hmm. Also, I think to this day, still kind of an odd decision. I really feel that Ant-Man, which was the last movie of Phase 2, really should have been the first movie of Phase 3. Mm-hmm. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know why the decision was made to not end on an Avengers movie. Mm-hmm. But, of course, they also did that with Phase 3.
Yeah.
And also Phase 4, because Phase 4 did not have an Avengers movie.
Oh, yeah, it didn't. I forgot about that.
So it's definitely, in my opinion, one of the weirder choices that the MCU's made, but... Without further ado, let's kind of talk about that. Age of Ultron, when it was announced, was to much fanfare, I think, mm-hmm. when the title was announced. Ultron, for those that don't know, is one of the Avengers' longest, most recurring foes. In the comics, he was made by Henry Pym, and we'll talk about why that is not the case here in the MCU. And proved to be a very persistent enemy. Because kind of like how Brainiac is that recurring, supercomputer in the DC side,
yeah.
Ultron is basically that for the MCU. Mm-hmm. He's a supercomputer with a near impenetrable body and basically impossible to kill because he always has backups.
Yeah.
And he also is known for making a fleet of Ultron drones that can overwhelm the Avengers in several different iterations. And, always has to be careful, like, oh, when do we spot Ultron activity? We got to hit that hard, otherwise he's going to have a whole army, like, within days.
Yeah.
But Ultron was considerably depowered for this movie. And that's something that Joss Whedon and several of the actors, I believe Kevin Feige, have all commented on, is like they were looking at Ultron in the comics and like, we cannot bring this to the MCU in its current stage.
Oh, okay.
We cannot. He's too powerful for a single movie. But, again, we'll save the whole Marvel villain issues, which I believe are very fair at this point in the MCU. It's been pretty apparent Marvel doesn't know what to do with their villains.
Yeah.
And we'll save that discussion for after we do our review, but the interesting part about this was there was a lot of speculation. As I mentioned, in the comics, Ultron was made by Hank Pym.
Yeah.
Otherwise known as Ant-Man. Hank Pym hadn't been introduced yet.
Nope.
I don't even think he'd been name-dropped at this point. He might have had, like, a cameo and some, like, tie-in material, but I think as far as, like, the main movies, I don't think he was even name-dropped.
No, not that I remember, at least.
Yeah. So it's something that, we had there was a lot of speculation as to, well, okay, with the Ant-Man movie coming immediately after Age of Ultron, are they going to introduce Hank Pym here?
Yeah.
Is he going to... be kind of that surprise, and is he going to help Tony, build Ultron just like they did in the comics, or is this going to be something with, how is this movie going to tie into Ant-Man coming up? And of course, That's not what happens
Nope.
in this movie. So, spoilers for a movie that at this point has been out for, I believe, 8 years. Yeah, this Hank Pym and Ant-Man have nothing to do with this movie.
Nope.
At all.
Not at all.
No involvement, no mention, nothing.
Which for the normie, like, casual audience, like, you wouldn't know anyways.
Yeah, but for the hardcores and the comic book fans, this was a really weird omission and arguably one of the weirdest changes that the mainline MCU has made.
Yeah, because this is one of, like, the biggest changes they've made, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah. So it's definitely one of those things where it was controversial, I think, to say the least, to not include Hank Pym here and to give all the credit to Tony and, of course, Bruce. Not to say that, neither of them could have done it, but it's just Ultron is so closely tied with Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne, who's the Wasp in the comics, that it just felt really weird to not include any members of them.
Yeah.
And to not even name drop them or have a cameo or a file or something, right? It was a very strange omission to comic book fans. And while the MCU had definitely gone mainstream by this point, it still felt really weird, like...
Yeah, I mean, because even up to this point, they were keeping it, like, not one-to-one with any of the comics, but it's been pretty close, They haven't just rewrote, like, entire pieces of someone's origin story before.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, a lot of the origin stories were reimagined, but they were still at least, kept to at least similar to the comics, like in the same spirit, if not almost beat for beat.
Yeah, if not just a modernized version.
But here, outright, it's just, no, we're just going to totally give Tony Stark Ultron. And...
Now, in the comics, why... I don't remember exactly why Hank Pym makes Ultron. Is it the same general principle?
Yeah, kind of. It's more... So, it depends on the origin, but generally speaking, Hank Pym is a pacifist, like, for the most part. He doesn't like fighting. He's a scientist first, and he wants to help villains, so Ultron was a peacekeeping tool. It was, basically like a therapy robot, almost, in some iterations, and others...
Okay.
And in others, it was like, Tony Stark was trying to use this same robot that Hank Pym designed for military purposes. Because, Stark had that military background, right? So that's always kind of where, like, Hank Pym has had, like, friction with Stark and other members is... And we kind of will see that a little bit in Ant-Man and the Wasp, but, like, even in the original Ant-Man, like, the interpretation of Hank Pym is a bit strange, even for... even in Ant-Man, played by Michael Douglas. But we'll get to that later. So I mean, pretty much, like, Hank Pym his idea for Ultron was a peacekeeping tool. Like, it wasn't supposed to be like this power-mad robot, which is kind of what makes the story of Ultron so tragic, is there wasn't supposed to be military applications, and, depending on the iteration.
Yeah.
And then, like, I remember, for example, in Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which was the cartoon... they have to arm Ultron out of necessity, not because of...
Them wanting to.
Yeah, not because they wanted to. But
okay.
So that's kind of the general thought is like, Ultron was originally supposed to be this, peacekeeping tool with a love of humanity, and he wasn't. So while they did keep that kind of in mind, because when Stark does design him in this movie, it is to form that shield around the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same general thought process.
Yeah.
I mean, again, more military in mind when he was originally making it than some other iterations. But yeah, they did keep the general spirit alive, just, totally changed the father of Ultron. Yeah,
which is kind of where the weird part is. And, like, on the one hand, it makes sense because Henry Pym hadn't been introduced. But on the other hand, if you're going to need to introduce this other brilliant scientist, the creation of his core project that he's most known for would be a great way to do so.
Especially when his movie was next in line.
Yeah, exactly. It already been announced and everything. And especially because I think at this point it had already been announced that Hank Pym wasn't going to be Ant-Man. It was going to be Scott Lang.
Yeah.
Who in the comics is the second Ant-Man, just like in the movies. But... So we already kind of knew that Hank Pym had been established and been out there, so it's like, well, okay, and again, like maybe from a non-casual audience, but it's the best way to again, why not have him mingle with the Avengers immediately? Because Hank Pym is another one of the members of the founding members of the Avengers.
Yeah,
along
back
with
in the
Wasp.
comics, yeah.
So it's a very weird choice to just exclude Hank Pym entirely, at least in my opinion. And even to this day, I look back at it and go, this is one of the weirdest choices the MCU's made. And they made some weird ones for sure. But, again, and unlike a lot of areas where, like, we talked earlier about in the Guardians podcast, right? How, like, Drax and Mantis don't really get a lot to do outside of the Guardians films. At least they're there. Henry Pym hasn't been involved in the Avengers at all at this point. And that's extremely unusual. So I understand there were some issues with the Ant-Man film and, like Edgar Wright leaving and a whole bunch of other stuff. We'll talk about that next time. But again, it just feels really weird that with the MCU being as interconnected as it is and stuff being referenced and cameoed and hinted at even from the beginning.
They easily could have name dropped and introduced him if they wanted to.
Yeah, at the very least given some kind of cameo or like have Stark base his design off of the work of Henry Pym in S.H.I.E.L.D. Like something like that. But they choose not to do it here. And it's such a weird choice in my opinion. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked, I think, about the whole exclusion of Henry Pym, let's talk about some of the other things leading up to this movie. They cast James Spader as Ultron, and to this day, I still think it's one of the best casts the MCU's ever done.
Oh yeah, no, I love Ultron's cast.
His voice is phenomenal, and the way he portrays it, and it's just this perfect, creepy... almost human robot.
Yeah, but definitely not quite human.
Yeah, and just has that, he just has a presence among himself with, again, just his voice, because a lot of this was motion capture, that, just carries the threat that Ultron could have been. And, of course, also, we had Aaron Taylor Johnson cast as Pietro, Quicksilver, who first made his appearance, I want to say, in the post-credit scene of, I think it was Winter Soldier.
I don't remember.
We also had Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff. And the return of pretty much everybody else. Yep. Colby Smulders, Samuel L. Jackson, Anthony Mackie makes a brief appearance. Don Cheadle actually gets to do something in Avengers film for the first time, which is really exciting. Jeremy Renner, of course, Scarlett Johansson, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, and of course, RDJ. Just the casting again, you look at this movie and it's like, man, Marvel's casting has always been like on point because I think everybody nailed their characters here. Elizabeth Olsen, I think, has proven to be one of the biggest sleepers. I honestly didn't expect or know much about her. Full confession, didn't even know she was the younger sister of the Olsen twins. I never really put that together. I just thought she had the same last name. And as it turns out, she's been one of the longest tenured MCU actors at this point, which is pretty weird. That's still there.
That's kind of funny to say.
Yeah, and, it's unfortunately for Aaron Taylor Johnson, which we'll get into in a minute, among another odd decision this movie makes. And... just again, the cast is amazing. And I know that I've said that this is probably like the worst Avengers film in my opinion, but it does have one of my favorite scenes with, I think, really highlights the chemistry, and that's when they're just casually trying to lift Thor's hammer. Yeah. Like, to my...
Yeah, no, that is a great, as far as character building and, team development.
Yeah, it's one of the scenes I wish that MCU would do a bit more often. Kind of like that scene with, Natasha and Steve in Sam's house, hey, if you do, I just made breakfast. If you do that sort of thing.
Yeah, if superheroes do that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's that small slice of life moment. And I understand that, hey, especially with as Phase 3 really accelerates, they didn't have as much time for that. Yeah. But this, I think, is one of the best examples of that type of chemistry and relationship between the cast, and you can just tell that. They had a good time filming the scene. You can tell.
Yeah, and there was hints of Cap moving the hammer in this movie.
Yep, lots of foreshadowing here, which we'll talk about as we go through the movie. But, it was pretty interesting. And, of course, after the success of the first Avengers film, there were very high expectations for this movie. It was one of the most expensive movies ever made, I think, with a budget of $235 million or something like that. It was insane, especially at the time. And I do believe that this movie would go on to have a huge profit. But I think in hindsight, most people kind of look at this movie and go, yeah, out of the Avengers film, it's probably the worst one.
Yeah, but I don't think it totally failed expectations.
No, no.
I think it had lofty shoulder or shoes to fill.
Yeah.
But I do think it was able to fill the shoes. Maybe not perfect or more than what we wanted, but again, I think it was a very good movie at the time.
Yeah, I'm not arguing that. I just think with the benefit of hindsight and even I think a lot of things too with this movie is that there's just a lot of weird decisions with the plot and the pacing.
Yeah.
And it's just I really feel that Joss Whedon, who is the director of this movie, and just like he did for the first Avengers, and I want to remind everybody, this was before it came out that Whedon was a huge asshole. So he was very much at the peak of his public popularity at this point.
Yeah.
And I think you could just tell he was burnt out. And I don't know how much of it had to do with the back-end politics, but this movie has a lot of problems in it. And a lot of issues with pacing and not so great at character balancing and stuff like that. And some pretty questionable decisions by a lot of the characters. And so we'll without further ado, we'll just kind of stop beating around the bush and dive into it. The movie literally opens up with the Avengers besieging the last Hydra base.
Yeah.
And as we kind of talked about it in the Captain America Winter Soldier episode, this is another really odd decision that this movie makes, is to basically just kill off Hydra within the first, opening sequence.
Oh, yeah, because I remember going into this movie, thinking, oh, man, so Hydra's got to play, a big part in this next Avengers movie. Mm-hmm. I wonder if they have something to do with Ultron, or I don't know what's going on. Nope.
Yeah.
They just... First scene... Just get rid of Hydra. We're done.
Yep, they have Hydra, Baron von Strucker, and Hydra are fighting against the Avengers. The Hydra goons are, as you can imagine, panicking. Von Strucker encourages his men to never surrender, and then promptly turns to Dr. List, his right-hand man who helped experiment on the twins, and basically says, "I'm going to surrender as quietly as possible."
Yeah.
So he sends all of his soldiers to die fighting the Avengers.
I know, right?
And then threatens to surrender. This action scene is actually probably one of my favorite in the movie, because you get to see a lot of the teamwork with the Avengers.
Yeah, they do a lot of team-ups, in this fight.
Some fun stuff with, Hulk and Thor and Cap teaming up. Cap hilariously chiding Iron Man for saying the word shit.
Yeah.
Which will go on to a recurring theme here, kind of doing that Marvel humor in their action scenes, keeping things lively. But at the same time, if I am critical of this, it does really take the big threat that Hydra was built up in Winter Soldier and just totally throws them under the bus.
Well, when you throw the Avengers at it, they have a Hulk. They
do, but nonetheless, the Hulk actually doesn't do a ton aside from rescue Hawkeye, who gets shot. He blows up the bunker, but you don't really see a lot of the Hulk in this. And that's, I think, a missed opportunity, is you see a lot of the focus is on Tony. And obviously that would become a recurring plot moving forward. But there is a very brief introduction where Quicksilver comes in and basically punches the Avengers once and then runs away, including mocking Hawkeye, which will become a recurring thing in this movie. But you don't really even see Scarlet Witch too much. She does kind of influence Stark at the end, but and when I say the end, I mean the end of this Hydra scene, right, where they're trying to retrieve the Loki staff that he used to mind control everybody.
Yeah.
Which we'll find out in this movie contained the Mind Stone, so total makes sense. But she kind of holds Pietro back, so they make an appearance, they reveal themselves, but don't really do anything yet. And it's later explained that Scarlet Witch saw what Stark would do with the Mind Stone to create Ultron. But even then, it's kind of it doesn't really explain Scarlet Witch's powers, who's known for chaos magic and rewriting reality in the comics.
Well, yeah, they have to rewrite her powers later.
Yeah, well, they do this multiple times, so it's very strange how they decide to do this. And Also, giving her powers as the origination from the Mind Stone also doesn't make a lot of sense either.
Yeah.
Same with Pietro.
Yeah, they were using the Tesseract to do experiments on them.
Well, it wasn't the Tesseract. It was the Mind Stone.
Or the Mind. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
the Loki staff.
Yeah, Loki staff.
I got
it's
it backwards. But yeah.
Okay, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but we'll cover that later. So again, what I'm saying is a lot of questionable, weird decisions in this movie.
Yeah, but in not that to make it better, but in their defense, they couldn't use the X-Men.
No, they couldn't use the word mutant, but it's there still could have been so many better ways, I think, to explain
I'm
this.
not arguing with you one bit, but I think they wanted to rewrite it and then put the Infinity Stones in it just to make it, more connected with what they were currently doing.
Yeah.
Not that it was the best idea, but it was the idea they had.
So I guess since we dropped the mutant word here, let's paint
M-word.
Let's paint the picture of why Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were allowed in this movie and what was going on at the time. So in the bigger picture, at this point, Fox still owned the right to the X-Men and all mutants. The reason why Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were allowed to be in this movie without being referred to as mutants is because they were also members of the Avengers for a long period of time. So Marvel could use a version of Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch.
Yeah.
They just couldn't refer to them as mutants or anything like that.
Yeah.
Very complicated, very petty. This is also the time, just for a little bit of context, where the Inhumans are being pushed in the comics and the X-Men are on their way out. Marvel is literally cutting off the X-Men.
Yeah, because of this whole politics and debacle.
And legal rights and all sorts of other stuff.
They're trying to not have the X-Men in the comics so that way the price of the X-Men go down so they can buy them back.
Yeah, exactly. They're basically trying to devalue the X-Men.
Yeah.
And I have to say, Fox didn't help with that with their we'll have one good movie and then a bad movie thing at this point.
Yeah, but they weren't intentionally doing it.
That I don't. I honestly, it's hard to say. With some of the decisions they made with story writing, I'm very, very skeptical about saying something like that. Let me just put it that way. But yeah, so basically we have here a really weird situation where you have Quicksilver and Wanda Maximoff, Scarlet Witch. Wanda is not referred to as the Scarlet Witch, and she will not be referred to as the Scarlet Witch until WandaVision, so Phase 4.
Yeah.
And Quicksilver is never mentioned by the name Quicksilver either.
Yeah, no, it's
just Pietro. And you have them where they have their powers, but it's not really explained how.
And Quicksilver, he's still fast.
Yeah, he's still really fast.
But then Wanda's powers were mind powers, I guess, question mark?
Which made a bit more sense, but then it was also she did the weird thing with her fingers and manipulating power, so it's really, really hard to to quantify her powers in this movie.
Yeah.
And that doesn't help the casual viewer. So they go away from it, and then of course they retcon it in WandaVision.
Oh yeah, no, they just totally redo it.
It is something where basically like you said before, they didn't have an origin for her powers, so they're well, we know the Mind Stone was here, but the problem is that Hydra only had the Mind Stone in universe time for under 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's you're gonna tell me that in 3 years they managed to test they managed to develop these powers for Wanda and Pietro, and
apparently
then they have when you first see them at the end of Winter Soldier, they're struggling with their powers, and suddenly they're good with them now.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff where it's you have to, a lot of comic books about suspending disbelief, but it's just, for me, it just feels like a very weird, rushed decision. And I think that's a big issue in this movie, is I feel a lot of stuff is rushed. And so going back to the plot, they defeat Hydra, and Wanda does a little mind manipulation with Stark, and apparently can foresee the future.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Question mark.
Which she never uses again.
Nope.
By the way, after this movie. So we've got Stark grabs the Mind Stone, Loki's staff, and
because he had his vision about Thanos in this scene, right?
It wasn't Thanos per se, but it was him walking amongst all of his dead comrades, and Steve Rogers asking him why he didn't do more.
Oh, okay.
That was the vision that Wanda gave him like with this here.
Okay.
And, again, we can talk about this, with a different... We'll talk more about this later when Wanda tries to mind manipulate all the Avengers and succeeds on everybody except, hilariously enough, Hawkeye. Yeah. But it's something to me that it's like, yep, okay, so you've established her powers coming from the Mind Stone. She has mind manipulation. It's like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, seems legit. Like
that makes sense. Really weird decision for me still, but okay, let's roll with it. So we skip ahead now. Hydra's been defeated. They've captured Von Strucker, who has a super disappointing showing, as we've talked about before. Like, oh, he's like one of the like big bads of Hydra. He's like the most notorious leader outside of like Madam Hydra or Red Skull. Mm-hmm. And he has about 5 minutes of actual appearance, if that, here in this movie.
Yeah.
And does nothing with it except for send his soldiers to die and then...
I wonder if they had more planned for Hydra and something happened, like, behind the scenes.
I honestly don't know, but it definitely feels, especially with what happens to Strucker in this movie.
Well, they, for the last movie for Winter Soldier, they specifically, like, didn't get rid of Hydra. Mm-hmm. The one MCU movie where they don't. So to just, like, nix them at the first part of like the next main movie, it just seems so weird.
It's such a missed opportunity. And again, it's a big issue I have with this movie is it's not necessarily the plot itself, but again, I look at the MCU as a collective whole because that's what it was designed to be. Everything is connected with their advertisement. So of course, that's the lens I look at through. And I see this and I'm like, here's the villain problem right off the bat. You took one of your best villain organizations, literally with ties to Nazis. You can't get a better villain example than that. And you just killed them off in the first opening sequence of your Avengers movie?
Yeah, but it's not even like, all the other movies that get rid of the villain the same movie.
Yeah.
Like, they specifically didn't. It's like, oh, okay, this is going to be an ongoing threat. And it's like, no.
No, it didn't even make it, like, a full movie after. It made it through, like, the first, like, eighth of a movie.
Yeah, I know. So, yeah, it was... Again, that feels kind of rushed, like you were saying.
Yeah. So, we go in, and the Avengers are throwing a party at Stark's. And while this is happening, Tony convinces Bruce to, hey, like, let's study the Mind Stone and make artificial intelligence with it. Which I'm like, okay, that's a connection I could see. You have, like, the literal Mind Stone.
Yeah.
And you're going to make artificial intelligence with it?
The quantification of a mind, in physical space.
Yeah, the universal singularity of representing the power of thought. Like, okay. So, like, again, at least we're on theme here with how you're using the Mind Stone. He gave Wanda powers. I don't know how super speed comes from that, but...
his mind is so unlocked, he's super fast.
Oh, God, we're not going to have that discussion. Although that was a Scarlett Johansson movie. But, yeah, so it's like, okay... Putting Quicksilver aside and how he got his powers, at least Wanda's powers coming from the Mind Stone makes sense, and creating artificial intelligence from the Mind Stone makes sense.
It tracks.
Like, all right, we're on board here. You got me here. Yeah. You brought me back. Yeah. After kind of losing me, you've brought me back.
We can follow the bouncing ball that is their thought process.
Yeah. So now, while they're like preparing for this party, Tony, like he always does, has Jarvis do like all the hard work.
No.
Like monitoring this thing.
Hey, you know what? Jarvis is going to get rewarded for this, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and, it makes sense for Bruce is non-confrontational, that's been established, so it's like, okay, I can see Tony, like, convincing him to do this. And, to create Ultron. So it's like, all right. So the Avengers go up, they party, they have this really funny scene where they are trying to kind of, like, establish Bruce and Nat as a couple. Mm-hmm. After they kind of teased it a little bit.
Oh, yeah, they did the lullaby at the beginning of the movie.
They did, which was another really weird choice that I'm not happy about. I got to tell you, the idea that only the woman can cause the raging beast devalues, I think, both Black Widow and devalues the Hulk as characters. I'm not a fan of that decision. Mm-hmm. I don't like it. And while I don't mind the chemistry between Ruffalo and Johansson here, this was, I think, in my opinion, because, again, it came out that Joss Whedon, despite the fact that almost all of his projects had, like, strong female characters, is a huge misogynist and made some threats to Gal Gadot and other things. Like, This, I think, was the first time I looked at one of his works and went, wait, there's something off about this. Like, you know, and then, of course, it would come out later. And I'm not going to say I knew any about this or suspected it, but it was just, I thought it was really weird and I hated it when I saw it. I'm like, ugh, I don't like it. And it's not to say that I don't like the possibility of a relationship between Bruce and Nat. I just don't like the way anything worked in here, aside from their flirting, which was funny.
Yeah.
But there's a couple scenes that I'm not a fan of, and the whole like lullaby is a big one. I'm not a fan of.
Oh, okay.
What I do like is when Thor tries to do it later.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, you took something that's kind of odd and kind of creepy, and you turned it into something hilarious. Like, good for you. But I'm not a fan. So we have here that, you know, Cap tries to be a good wingman for Bruce and is like, hey, you should go for it. Like, I've seen her flirt up close. And then Bruce is like, what do you mean up close?
Yeah.
So a nice little nod to, you know, Winter Soldier, right? And, of course, then they do the whole, oh, ye shall be worthy to lead the power of Thor. And, you know, Hawkeye and, you know, Stark are the most skeptical. Bruce has probably one of the funniest moments where he like pretends to be the Hulk.
Yeah, and everyone freaks out.
No one freaks out. They're just kind of looking at him like, what is he doing? And, and the only one who laughs is Nat. And it's like, okay, like that, I like that. That's good. The flirting at the bar was good. As you mentioned, you see Cap actually like move it.
Yeah.
And
I did like Tony like with the one of the gloves, like the rocket boosters are going,
yeah.
And then later he gets Rhodey.
Yeah, he gets Rhodey to do the same thing, and neither of them can do it. And they're like complaining about like, do your part, right?
Yeah, yeah, like the both of them are trying to, but yeah, and then Cap nudges it, and then Thor's face when Cap gets it to budge,
and then the relief on his face when Cap gives up, and of course it will be explained later by I think one of the Russos that like. Yeah, Cap could always lift it. He just knew that if he had lifted it right then and there, it would have. Thor was not ready for that. Like he was too proud. He would not have. It would not have done well for Thor. It would have been a blow to his ego. So it's like okay, but again, that's something that I think was a nice little teaser.
Yeah.
Again, everything about this scene is great, and then Nat refusing to do it.
Yeah.
Right at all.
Like y'all are just stupid boys.
Yeah. Like Hawkeye tries it. You know. Stark tries it multiple times.
Yeah, multiple times.
Rhodey tries, Banner tries, Rogers tries, and it's fun, and everyone's having a good time. Maria Hill's even having a good time, and if you know anything about her in the comics, she's like all business. So to see her kind of like drinking and laughing was a lot of fun. But then, of course, the party gets interrupted because Ultron has discovered has basically come to life. That their experiment finally succeeds. He looks on the internet for 7 seconds and decides that humanity needs to be destroyed.
That was one of my favorite memes.
Oh, it's fantastic. And so accurate, too. That's so real. Like, such a good outcome and great interpretation.
He's online. Wait, he's on the internet. And he wants to murder us all now.
And then he murders Jarvis, kinda.
Yeah.
Takes over one of, like, these old Iron Man suits. Does his I have no strings on me type thing, like makes that first line that Spader, and his delivery is just so perfect in this.
Yeah.
And then, takes over all the Iron Man suits and basically starts fighting the Avengers, who are not prepared.
Yeah, all those suits that Tony got rid of.
Yeah. All those, the broken remains of the suits he blew up that he inexplicably has in this movie. And again, we'll talk more about that later. We talked about that at length in Iron Man 3. But
I'm just opening old wounds.
No, you're more pointing out the many flaws of this movie and of the MCU at this point. And they fight. Ultron escapes. The Avengers get pissed at Tony because he did all this behind their backs.
Yeah.
And now they have to deal with Ultron. So they track Ultron down. Who Ultron meets up with the Maximoff twins. Wanda reveals that she predicted Stark would do something based on his fear of losing his teammates and friends. And the Maximoffs, for some reason, decide to join with Ultron. I know it's out of revenge for Stark. They talk about Stark. They'll reveal that Stark Tech, killed their parents and they should have survived, and that would also have been retconned later into Wanda using some kind of some hex. So she never actually got her powers from the Mind Stone, which is another issue I have with this movie. Is it turns out, no, she had them all along, just the Mind Stone like amplified them. It's like, okay, but...
We find that out later. It's okay right now.
but again, we're looking at this from the purpose of hindsight, so we have to address everything.
No, I'm just playing.
And, they go make a deal with Ulysses S. Claw, which is a Black Panther villain. Mm-hmm. And they even drop Wakanda.
Yeah, which is actually the first time, right?
Yeah, first time Wakanda's mentioned. And Bruce hilariously mispronounces it at first, which is so in line with Bruce's character. But during the attack, I mentioned there was another scene with Bruce and Nat that I really did not care for. And it was Nat pulls Bruce over the bar, and Bruce lands face into her chest. Mm. And it's like, was that really necessary? It's at this point it's 2015. And that had happened for so long, but it's like, was that really necessary here?
Probably not.
Yeah, it felt like such an unnecessary scene, and I know some people are going to disagree with me, maybe I'm being too picky, but especially with the hindsight of like Joss Whedon's like rampant sexism and the way he treated his female stars on all of his projects, like, it just comes across even worse to me. And I'm not a fan of it. So I just wanted to address that real quick before we kind of go too far.
Yeah. Okay.
So the Maximoff twins, they join up, they get vibranium.
Oh baby.
Yeah. Ultron, basically creates, I think, billions for, turns him into like a millionaire or a billionaire, immediately because he has access to these finances. Because he's a powerful supercomputer with access to the internet. And the Avengers come in. Claw ends up losing an arm when Claw says that Ultron is behaving like Tony Stark.
Oh, yeah.
And...
so he gives him a claw.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't give him the claw. Yeah. Claw will get the claw later.
Yeah.
But...
gives him the reason for the claw.
Mm-hmm. And the Avengers fight. They lose badly when Wanda messes with most of their minds.
Yeah, and this is where, like, the point of the movie where I was like, oh, okay, so this is, like, every Avengers movie, like, they're going to add some infighting or something. You know, and the story reason was Wanda in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, messing with their minds.
Yep.
Because in the first Avengers, it was them just trying to get along. They were fighting each other.
Yeah, it was a literal clash of personalities, which was really appropriate.
Yes.
Because they shouldn't have just become friends.
Yeah, no, I mean, it made sense them not to just all of a sudden, like, are we best friends now?
Yeah, but here it's like, no, now you have Wanda using her mind powers that she got from the Mind Stone, but apparently had all along.
Now, the Mind Stone just gave her super mind powers.
Yeah, I don't know how you would word this, but at this point, the MCU, what it really comes down to, I think the simplest thing, the MCU at this point was afraid to introduce magic. They didn't know how.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at Thor.
Yeah.
Like, magic is just science that you don't understand.
That's why I'm like, why don't you just say she's a witch? Like,
well, yeah, just with them trying to make Thor not magic, even though, like...
he is. Yeah, Anyway, so they turn, Wanda gets hilariously caught by Hawkeye, of all people, who says, done the mind control thing, not a fan.
Yeah.
And
I don't care for it much, so let's just not do it.
Nice little callback to the Avengers when he got brainwashed.
Yeah.
And, giving Hawkeye kind of his moment in the sun for a moment here.
Yeah, for real.
Really turning Hawkeye from kind of just that guy in Avengers.
Yeah, because he's kind of like, sidekick tier as far as the main core of the Avengers, Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, they actually made sure to, like, give him some time to shine. And it makes sense, though, too. Like, he was mind-controlled in the last movie, and he's dealt with it. Yeah. So, like, he knows how to deal with it now. Yep.
And, again, it also keeps Hawkeye's, like, undefeated streak alive. Like, he literally never loses a fight that he's in, like, ever. Nope. In, like, the entire MCU. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. He goes from sidekick character to, like, when you look at his, like, stats.
Yeah, he's
technically the strongest MCU character.
Yeah, on paper, he's, I think, undefeated. Mm-hmm. So... yeah, good for him, man. But yeah, Hawkeye, Quicksilver, of course, being the good brother that he is, gets Wanda out of there after Hawkeye zaps her brain with an arrow.
Yeah.
Like, literally puts, like, an arrow right in the middle of her forehead and, like, zaps her with it. And he goes and helps out all the other Avengers who all took a huge mental hit. All of them basically had to relive their trauma. And this is another issue with the movie, is that the only one that's a bit odd is Thor's, because it's like, yeah, Heimdall shows up for a minute and warns him about Ragnarok, but then his key scene that explains why he makes the decision he does later in this movie got edited out for time.
Oh, okay.
Where, he goes to the pool and he gets possessed because he's getting answers on Ragnarok and the Infinity Stones and stuff like that. But that got cut out of the movie.
Oh, okay.
So all of a sudden, it just he goes into this, to seek answers, and he comes back and he brings Vision to life and sides with Stark, which Banner comments, oh, this is definitely the end times. Because Thor was the angriest that, Tony went behind their backs earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
So this key turnaround point doesn't get explained super well. But yeah, Thor is obviously shaken by Tales of Ragnarok, which I think is fair. Steve is, shaken because he goes back in time and realizes, yeah, I'm a man out of time, and the war's over, and he doesn't know what to do if there isn't a conflict.
Yeah, he has a literal mental breakdown.
Yeah. Of course, we already know what happened with Tony, where he saw all of his friends dead. And then, Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow, sees the Red Room, which will be elaborated on later.
Yep.
But, how she became, the Black Widow. It's a really good look into her past. I think as critical as I've been with Whedon's handling of Johansson's character so far, this is, I think, the most notable of the Wanda, mind melding scenes, is seeing, aside from Tony's, of course, who sees all his friends dead.
Yeah.
It's understanding more about Natasha's character in a way that, makes sense.
It's a way to,
it's a flashback.
Still have Wanda do what she needs to do.
Yeah.
But then give us more background information.
Yeah, on Natasha, who at this point has not had a lot of screen time, aside from, she was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in, Iron Man 2, and then she becomes an Avenger in in Avengers, and then she's Cap's partner in Winter Soldier, but we still don't know a whole lot about
and that's kind of in character with her too.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Again, she's a spy. It makes total sense. But at this point, we don't know anything about Hawkeye or Widow, really. And this is the first real glimpse we have into her past.
All I know is Hawkeye ends up marrying Vilma.
Yeah, right. But we have here, as I mentioned, we don't know anything about Hawkeye. We're about to get a huge reveal about Hawkeye here. Yeah. And the Avengers realize, oh shit, Hulk just got brainwashed, which is Banner's worst fear.
Yeah.
And he goes on a rampage in in the city, and Tony has to get the Hulkbuster armor.
He gets the big guns.
Veronica.
Yeah, it's call Veronica. I'm like, who the fuck is Veronica?
It's the Hulkbuster.
And then the Hulkbuster comes out, and I said yes.
So they fight. There's some pretty good comedy in there, but eventually,
sleep.
Yeah. But eventually, Hulk gets snapped out of his Scarlet Witch induced state.
Yeah.
And immediate regret from the Hulk.
Yeah.
Who then turns back into Banner, of course. And Hawkeye takes them to his safe house, which is, in fact, his actual house.
Yeah, his safe house is his house.
So I just want to mention that there's been comments on how insanely stupid this was for Hawkeye, where you have a robot with access to all of the S.H.I.E.L.D. information and everything that's now on the web. And you take him to your house where your wife and kids are? You take your team to your home? Now, as it turns out, his wife is, in fact, a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. That will be revealed in the Hawkeye series. But Hawkeye, what are you thinking, man? You're putting your friends, your family in direct danger now? And yeah, it's kind of hand-waved as yeah, I had Fury keep this off the books for me type thing. But Natasha knew about it. So it just, I don't know, it's another one of those decisions where it's oh, it's this cool family vibe. We get to learn more about Hawkeye, which is really cool. But logically speaking, it's why would Hawkeye do this to his kids and his wife? Why would he put them in danger?
I mean, if anything happens is going to come, his wife will just say jinkies and they'll figure it out. No, but yeah, I don't know.
It's another decision where it's like, I didn't think about it in the moment, but afterwards I'm like, why would Hawkeye do that? Like,
it's so safe. It's your own home, you know.
Yeah,
Can't feel safer than that.
And I mean, it's not like it's like hidden. It's like literally in the middle of an open field.
Uh-huh.
And you're talking about like a universe where like the technology is so advanced that they could create artificial intelligence.
But they're in the middle of nowhere. You can't find the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. not with all those Stark satellites that, yeah. Ultron has access to.
No, not at all.
So anyway, they have this kind of nice family moment. Nick Fury shows up to give the Avengers a pep talk. Thor runs off to go find out more information on Ragnarok, and I mentioned that scene was pretty much canceled. We do have a really nice moment where Thor's trying to blend in and near miss, as I think Selvig puts it, because he sticks out a little bit.
Yeah, just a bit.
But it's nice to see Selvig back again after being brainwashed.
Huh? You can't be a pirate god and just blend in like that.
Mm-hmm. But they discover, Ultron has gone after Dr. Cho, who is a pretty significant character in the Marvel Universe. In fact, her son is actually one of the smartest people in the MCU and actually becomes a Hulk.
Oh, yeah, he's the other...
The totally awesome Hulk.
Yes.
Yeah. And I can never pronounce his first name, but it's like Armidius or something like that.
Yeah,
Armidius Cho. But anyway, nice little cameo from her. And yeah, as it turns out, she gets brainwashed. Lo and behold, just in a nice little flashback from to the original Avengers movie. And Ultron has her build him a new body, which comic book fans would recognize as Vision.
Uh-huh.
But not the case here, at least not traditionally. Not revealed right away. And the Avengers show up. They successfully rescue Dr. Cho. And they capture Vision. So, yeah. Then Ultron goes to Sokovia for the final showdown. But while he's prepping that, and he kidnaps Nat, so Nat becomes the damsel in distress here.
Yeah.
Which, again, just... hindsight, especially with what we know about Whedon.
Should have made Thor the damsel in distress.
100%. Or Cap. Like, literally, in one scene, Hawkeye tells him, you don't stand a chance against him, Cap. And Cap goes, thanks, Barton. But, yeah, the idea is... Oh, by the way, all of a sudden, because of Vision, Wanda can suddenly read Ultron's mind when she couldn't before. Mm-hmm. So, okay. Sure.
All right.
And that causes her and Pietro to abandon Ultron, which is why he kidnaps Scarlet Johansson.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, another couple questionable decisions here that don't really make a lot of sense in hindsight.
Huh.
But Tony decides he learned nothing from creating Ultron. Is like, hey, we'll put Jarvis, who he discovered was fighting against the nuclear codes.
Yeah.
We'll put Jarvis in Vision.
This AI didn't work, so how about we do this AI?
Yeah, let's take another AI. And Bruce is like, no, and then gets convinced by being called the mad scientist. Mm-hmm. Again, not really something I'm a fan of. Cap, meanwhile, gets convinced by his enemies who literally manipulated him, like, hey, Tony absolutely would, do this. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're right, but it just feels a bit weird, like, all of a sudden they're goody two-shoes again, on the same team. And, yeah, the Avengers fight again, Cap and Pietro and Wanda are obviously against raising Vision, while as, Stark is for it.
Yeah.
And then Thor comes in as deciding factor and actually powers up Vision and brings him to life with the Mind Stone. Mm-hmm. And again, that's not really explained why he decided to do that either. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay. But hey, look, we have Vision now. Mm-hmm. It's Paul Bettany, who actually makes his appearance.
I know, his first actual physical appearance in the MCU.
Yeah, and he actually, it's funny too, because he went from literally recording all his lines in post, and you just, showing up one-on-one and just doing voice recordings. So now he has to sit for one of the longest makeup jobs in the entire MCU.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny. It's So they brought Paul on his Vision. And yeah, it turns out Vision's a good guy. He's on our team. He has the Mind Stone. He's fine. Yeah, despite the fact he was built by Ultron and Ultron went crazy, Vision is fine because he's like a combination of Jarvis and Ultron and everything else.
What happened is Tony was a good guy, and he built Ultron to turn into a bad guy.
But then the bad guy built Vision.
So then he turned into a good guy.
Yeah, and I mean, in the comics, Vision is a good guy. He's an Avenger. You know, he's earned his place for sure.
I'm just saying, that's basic math right there.
Yeah, but, man, it's so much in one movie, and it's not explained well. Like, it's a great idea. I think it would have been great. I'm just not a fan of the execution.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting, like, to get Vision, like, at, what were we, like, 75% of the way through the movie or something? Like, we were in the tail end, and then all of a sudden it's like, bam, Vision.
Yep. So, Ultron goes back to Sokovia, has a whole army built in the time that all this is happening, apparently.
Which it took how long to build Vision's body, and then he built an entire army in like half that time?
That was the point I was not going to address directly, but I'm glad you said it, because yes, like I feel I've been very critical of this movie, so I'm glad you brought up a critical point here that, yes, that's exactly apparently what happened.
It's because they weren't super androids, they were just regular robots?
Yeah, so Wanda and Pietro suit up with them because they realize, hey, we only wanted revenge on Stark. We didn't want to, like, destroy the world.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, but now you're teaming up with Stark. So it's like, that suddenly just, like, disappears.
Yeah.
And this is also, like...
They're one of the idiots that live in that world, so if it gets destroyed...
Yeah, but they don't explain it that way. Like, again, like, that's the problem, is like, with Peter Quill, it's like, at least he makes that statement so you understand, but it's like, here, it's like, their whole thing was, they volunteered for Hydra to become powerful to take revenge on Tony Stark.
No, for sure.
Then they team up with Ultron, who they don't know, like, anything about his motivation other than he hates Tony Stark. And now, all of a sudden, because they see that Ultron is planning to destroy the entire world, they suddenly are okay with teaming up with Tony Stark, despite the fact that Tony just tried to build another AI monster that potentially could have turned against them. Like,
but it didn't.
Yeah. But it's like, man, explain this shit at least. Like, don't just, like, team them up together. Like, explain this. But, like, you literally go from, like, Wanda and Pietro, and again, like, Steve calls them out as, like, they were patriots who volunteered, you know, to be experimented on a German scientist to save their country, like, 100%, but, like, at this point, they're not saving their country anymore. It's like, so they're, like, their motivations don't even make sense here, and it's just a shame, and, because it's like, yeah, you knew they were going to join the Avengers, because they're core members of the Avengers, God, how we got here, just... A lot of pacing and questions. It's like, man,
we went from point A to point D.
Yeah, we skipped over B and C, and it's like, okay, like, fine. So they go to Sokovia, which again, coincidental that Ultron chooses Sokovia. Like, again, you're teaming up with two Sokovians. Why are you going to use Sokovia as the flashpoint for like your area, like to levitate it into the sky and then blow it all up, like...
Yeah, what was that? Like, if I raise it high enough, I'll fuck it up? Like...
Yeah, well, it was... So the idea is basically, like, I'm going to drop a stone on it, and, you know, if it falls at a high enough velocity, it would cause, like, you know, a dust cloud and global warming, and it would end life on Earth. It would cause an apocalyptic event. Like, okay, that's a good comic book-like thing, but...
I mean, it's a slow burn apocalyptic event, but nonetheless an apocalyptic event.
Yeah, and here's the other part that bothers me, is this is like the Hydra base, right, that he uses to like set this all up. Are you telling me the Avengers just like blew it up and then left it unguarded? Like there was no one...
Well, they blew it up. What do they need anymore?
It still had like all this Hydra technology in it though. Like,
nah.
I mean, I know S.H.I.E.L.D.'s gone, but it's like, come on, get the United Nations involved, like something. Like, I know Sokovia is a mess right now, but it's like, get the UN to get involved. You you literally have a global terrorist organization. Like, just there's so many bits about this movie that frustrate me so much.
Hey, if you look at the plot holes too long, then of course you're gonna get upset. You know, you just gotta go with the flow. Don't pay attention to all the plot holes.
Yeah, so... Anyway, so Ultron raises it up. They have this big battle. Hawkeye has this really nice, like, rapport with Quicksilver at this point. Like, they have a really good back and forth.
Well, I think they're building respect for each other.
For sure.
Is what it is.
For sure, but, like, you know, Jeremy Renner, God, this is, I think, one of my favorite performances of him. And it's like, I could shoot him right now. No, oh yeah, last time I saw the guy, he was like off over here fighting all these robots. Like, oh yeah, I'll miss him too. Like, like just really, really great like moment, because that's exactly the type of thing that like I would do in that situation. So 100% relatable to
not
Hawkeye.
actually do it, but really think about it.
Oh, I'd be tempted, especially after this guy's like, "Keep up, old man," or and after like he's like, "Didn't you see that coming?" Like sort of thing, and. They've built up this great rapport this entire movie. And then, of course, Hawkeye also gets, like, the big hero moment where he gives the big, like, Avengers speech to Wanda. And that will establish that relationship moving forward. But then they make the decision to really tease Hawkeye's death and give a swerve where Quicksilver dies saving him. And... on the one hand, it's nice to see a superhero movie with consequences. But on the other hand, you literally just introduce Quicksilver. And you kill him off. Along with Ultron.
Yep. How else are we going to get Ralph Boner?
Oh, God. Well, we've been going about this for an hour, so let's not tackle that now, but...
Yeah, no, but it was interesting. I mean, again, how I hinted to, they're building respect for each other, to see Quicksilver sacrifice himself to save Hawkeye, though, of all people. Like,
it's pretty cool, and it's very much in line with comics, but it feels like such a missed opportunity with Quicksilver, because he's such an interesting character.
Yeah, no, as far as killing him off, yes, but I mean, as far as, like, him saving Hawkeye, no, maybe if he, like... was just critically wounded and didn't die or something.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, like the way they built it up was interesting, though.
Yeah, and it was a good twist that I don't think a lot of people saw coming. And like, so I don't hate it, but I also feel, I don't know, I just feel like killing off Quicksilver and then this like tease in WandaVision that you alluded to.
Yeah.
It feels like such a missed opportunity, especially for one of the core Avengers cast members in Quicksilver.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. Like, I just feel that if you were going to kill off an Avenger, killing off a character who was a villain for 75% of the movie just doesn't feel like a great decision.
Yeah.
I don't know who you would substitute for that, but I don't know. It feels to me like they just rushed a lot of stuff.
Oh, okay.
And, like Vision becoming a good guy immediately after he's released. That really comical scene where he can wield the hammer, which is like what convinces like everybody else. It's like, okay, we can trust this guy. Yeah. But that was effective, but it's like, when Vision was built, he was originally a bad guy for a while. Like, he was serving Ultron, and then he became to question it. Instead, he just comes out questioning it immediately. And it's like, it just feels rushed. I feel like they could have done a really good build-up with, like, Vision as a villain. Like, especially if they've kept Ultron alive instead of killing him off. But, yeah, so they kill off Ultron, and the world is saved.
Well, and doesn't Vision just, like, single-handedly, like, just take down Ultron?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, for the most part, yeah. It's
because it was basically like that was supposed to be Ultron's better body.
Yeah, he cuts him off from the net, and then he finishes off his last body. And they have kind of this philosophical discussion at the end before Vision kills him.
Yeah,
and it's just a lot of decisions in this movie that I just look back and go like, man, I don't hate them. But there's so many things I just feel were rushed. And I think that's the best way to describe this movie.
Yeah.
Is everything, it feels like they tried to do too much in one movie. With Hydra, with Ultron, with Vision, with Quicksilver, with Scarlet Witch. And they just rushed a lot of stuff. And it just feels really disjointed and not very well put together to me. What about you? What's your kind of take on this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, like, Hydra was just weird how quick they glossed over it. I mean, I know you didn't care for the whole Quicksilver thing. I liked just the way they built the relationship to take it away. I thought that was a good, again, I would have liked to see Quicksilver. I liked his character.
Yeah.
But if they're going to kill somebody, it did seem, okay, the new person that you're not as invested in, if they're going to, like, get rid of somebody, is it less consequential?
Yeah.
But then also there's still some gravity, and it does set groundwork for Wanda's character.
It does, which is a good thing to come out of this. And I don't want to say, like, again, I don't hate this movie.
Yeah.
I just look at this movie and go, this is a very flawed movie.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of plot holes in this movie.
Yeah, a lot of plot holes, a lot of rushed decision making.
The whole...
Yeah.
I did like Vision, with the whole hammer and they can trust him, because they just basically built that in the other scene that we talked about.
Yeah, it was
them trying to lift the hammer.
Yeah, so while I may complain about them rushing Vision's character arc, I'm like, at least they did it in a way that made sense.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, oh yeah, he could just, like, hold the hammer, which everyone else failed to do. It's like, and even, like, Thor's reaction is priceless, where he's just kind of like...
Thank you, question mark. So, so yes, maybe, like, the whole him being good so quick was rushed, but the way they handled it, like, wasn't bad.
Excellent. One of the higher points for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I can see where you're coming from, that stuff is rushed.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it doesn't feel like a Spider-Man 3 where there's just so much stuff. Like, it didn't feel that much of, like, overload.
Yeah. Or even Amazing Spider-Man 2, right? Like... Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's fair, but for the MCU, we have higher standards.
Correct.
I think. So
no, I'm not trying to disagree that it's not rushed in points, but compared to other like rushed superhero products, like it doesn't feel as bad.
Yeah.
And I think maybe they learned, their lessons some, because I don't feel any of the next movies are as rushed.
Yeah, I think so. They do a better job, I think, moving forward in Phase 3, but Phase 2, like, there's so many parallels, I think, with Phase 4. It's just like, it just feels like they're relearning, or they're trying to kind of figure out how to wield this giant juggernaut that they've built.
Yeah, well, I feel Phase 2, they have this juggernaut.
Yeah.
They're like, what the fuck do we do with it?
Yeah, and then Phase 4 is, we finished the story that the juggernaut was building to, now what do we do?
Yeah, like what next? And then everybody wants something different.
Yeah, except they don't.
No, I know. But the vocal opinion is they want something different, so they're trying to see what they can do. And that was what we got for Phase 4. Yeah,
so let's talk some notable connections here, and we'll kind of break down. I know we spent like 45 minutes talking about the plot, but again, there's a lot to unpack here, and we missed some stuff. Like, we glossed over, remember how we talked about how quickly Hydra got rid of? We totally glossed over that Baron Strucker gets murdered, like, off camera.
Oh, yeah.
Like, by Ultron. Mm-hmm. And they just find his corpse. So he literally has, like, oh, I'm going to surrender. He gets knocked out by Captain America, and then he's dead. One of the key leaders of Hydra.
Yep, DED dead.
Just dead. Okay, cool. Hulk decides to abandon the team. Mm-hmm. And he disappears into a Quinjet, and they can't track him.
Yep.
Thor leaves to go search for more signs of Ragnarok.
Uh-huh.
Tony retires, ?
Again?
Yeah. And at the end scene, we see the new Avengers, where, Black Widow and Cap are the team leaders, and Rhodey, Vision, Falcon, and Scarlet Witch have all joined. Hawkeye retires, naming his son after Pietro for a sacrifice. And they all lived happily ever after. Not really.
No.
But again, I want to really stress, too, that I think part of what makes this movie frustrating is, in addition to the plot holes, in addition to the cut scenes, the janky pacing, the villain problem, I think, is never more apparent, and that's really saying something, than here.
Yeah, no, like, I mean, they got rid of a whole organization.
Baron Strucker, and Ultron.
Yeah.
In the same movie. Mm-hmm. Plus Quicksilver. That's pretty brutal, even for MCU villain standards.
Yeah. Again, the worst part, it's not even like Hydra was behind Ultron the whole time or something, and they both go at the end. You know, I don't know.
Hydra was literally just there to be fodder for the Avengers in the opening scene of the movie. That's it. They serve no other purpose.
And to, bring us Pietro and Wanda.
Yeah. And I don't know, like, it's just an MCU fan. It's still extremely frustrating because to this day, they still seem to struggle with villains. Mm-hmm. And it's just such a disappointment when, like, the most notable villains are Loki, who's now a hero, again, for the second time, and Thanos, who's the big bad of the Infinity War saga.
Yep.
So... Man, and it's such a shame because James Spader was phenomenal as Ultron. His delivery, again, I can't sing his praises enough. The cast, I think, did an amazing job with what they were given.
Yeah.
Spader, in particular, is the MVP of this movie for me.
Yeah, because don't they also bring Spader back in the What If series, right?
I don't think so, actually.
Or was that someone else?
I do think they brought someone back. I do think it was someone else, but...
My bad.
Yeah, Spader did an amazing job as Ultron.
Yeah.
He really made you feel like Ultron was a threat. His delivery, his I've got no strings on me rendition is super memorable. I would put it as like one of the most memorable things a villain has done.
Yeah. No, Ultron as a villain in this movie was pretty good. Like,
yeah.
No matter how like odd and rushed his origin story was, like...
But,
you know,
yeah, just an amazing job from him. I know your favorite moment of this movie was 100% the Hulkbuster versus Hulk fight.
Yep.
This does have some really good action scenes. As I mentioned, the opening scene is one of my favorites. It's a phenomenal battle scene and seeing the Avengers work together.
Yeah.
It's a pity it comes at the expense of Hydra, but it's nice to see them just like, you know, Cap back on his motorcycle, Tony flying around, you know, Thor, the Hulk, Hawkeye, and, you know, Widow. It's fun to see them working together as a more coordinated team.
Yeah.
Then the Hulkbuster Hulk fight is phenomenal. It's a great fight, and it's...
I'll still never understand why I think Tony repeatedly punching the Hulk in the face thinks it's going to be better, but it's something I would totally do, so...
Yeah.
And it's why it's hilarious.
Yeah, it's a comedy moment, and it works, especially when Hulk like spits out a tooth or whatever, and then he's like, "I'm sorry." Like,
yeah.
Robert Downey again just shows that he's such an MVP, like in everything he does. And again, I just want to give full credit. Like as critical as I've been of this movie and the decisions made behind this, I think all the actors really stand out. Like this is, I think, Jeremy Renner's like breakout movie in the MCU after having, you know, 2 smaller appearances, but it just shows like how good he could be as Hawkeye in this movie. He gets a lot of time. Robert Downey is always crushes it. Chris Evans is phenomenal. Hemsworth is still kind of stuck in that weird like Thor situation.
Yeah, the next movie.
Yeah, he'll break out
better,
he'll break out in Ragnarok, and then, you know, Scarlett Johansson does a great job flirting with everybody, and you know, just being the badass that she needs to be, except for when she's a damsel in distress for some fucking reason. Like, God, that's something else, too. It's like, you're going to take Black Widow, the super spy who can, like, literally break out of anything, and you're going to make her a damsel in distress? Literally anybody else would have been a better choice.
Yeah.
But, okay, fine, whatever.
Make the Hulk the damsel in distress.
Dude, that would have been hilarious. Because, well, and it would have worked, too, because, like, Banner was afraid to turn into the Hulk after being brainwashed. Like, it was his worst fear realized.
Yeah, no.
He would have been perfect, yeah. But no, they decided not to do that for some reason. I was like, okay. I mean, literally, like, freaking Black Widow has to force Banner to transform by pushing him off the cliff. Like, I love you, but I need the other guy. Like, it was right there. Like,
this
come
is
on.
Sparta.
Yeah.
Pushes him off the cliff.
Yeah. But it's just, I don't know. It's something that, you know, again, I've already talked about my opinions on the way they did this. It felt very ham-fisted and just outright creepy at times, unfortunately. But I feel like, man, that was a missed opportunity. Like, that could have been, like, really cool if they had done it right, but they did not do it right. So it's like, oh, okay, fine. But, man, you know, like, the one thing, though, again, is, like, something this movie does really well is it sets up for a lot of shit. Wakanda being name dropped here, putting Claw in here, which, you know, comic book fans, casual audience has no idea who he is. They know he's a criminal. They know he was a Wakandan, you know, thief.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, they've established all you need to know with him.
It still helps set up Wakanda even for the casuals.
Yeah, exactly. It's a perfect setup for Wakanda in introducing them. And it even involves vibranium, which is like the icing on the cake. Great setup there. As you mentioned, lots of good character moments. The continued divide between Cap and Stark in their approaches here will lead directly to Civil War. Lots of amazing setup in this movie, which is why it makes me so sad that the movie itself is just largely a mess.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned, the relationship with Wanda and Hawkeye starts here, and that'll be addressed in Civil War more and moving forward. Having Nat's flashback in here was good. An excuse to bring out the Hulkbuster armor, which was super cool, and that'll be relevant later.
A little bit. Not as much as I would appreciate, but yes.
But it's just lots of good stuff, good nuggets in this movie. And that's just, I think, part of the reason why I'm so critical of it is because I see how much better it could have been.
Yeah.
And, I see a lot of the mistakes, and I do feel that, Whedon was burnt out, and obviously he would turn out to be a huge piece of shit, but we didn't know that at the time.
Nope.
So, yeah, but with that being said, we have to circle back to the no Ant-Man reference. It's like you set all this other shit up, but you couldn't hint at Ant-Man at all? Weird.
Yeah.
Weird choice. And, yeah, Sokovia would obviously play a big role because they retcon Baron von Zemo, who would be from Sokovia, and then they would later retcon him to be a Baron, which is hilarious. So it's good stuff here, a lot of good stuff. But again, I think the villain problem, the kind of disjointed stuff, the rushed things, I think really hurt this movie. And I'll still go back and I'll go enjoy it and I'll watch it because a lot of these fight scenes are great.
Yeah, no, if you just watch it for dumb fun, there's plenty of dumb fun in this movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Every fight scene is phenomenal. Cap versus Ultron's good. Involving Hawkeye flying the Quinjet, Iron Man. I mean, just again, lots of good stuff here, but oof. Lot of bad stuff too, I think.
Yeah, if you analyze the overarching plot, there's lots of holes to poke.
Yeah, so I think this brought a bit of controversy, but this is probably in my bottom 3 of MCU films. It's still fun. I'll still enjoy it. Just like I've said about Thor: Dark World and Iron Man 3. I'll go back and I'll watch them still. So it's not that bad. But as far as MCU rankings, I rank this just above Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World.
Oh, okay.
How about you? What's your overall opinion on the movie?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd rank it that low because I don't, poke all the the plot holes as much as you do. Not that, it's any better per se, but yeah. No. I haven't really put too much thought, and I probably put it in, mid.
In the mid-tier?
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
But yeah, no, it's definitely not high up. I mean, obviously for Avengers films, it's going to be lower.
Yeah.
Because, just competing with all the other Avengers films is just too hard.
And I hate to say that. I really do. But it's... I think I made it very clear in this pod. I've been super critical of this movie.
Because even compared to, Captain America, Avengers 2.5, Civil War. I would still probably put that above this.
Yeah.
But again, this is still good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I wouldn't, it would not be top tier, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think we've been going now for about an hour and 15 minutes, but these Avengers films, I think, require a lot of detail. God, I am not looking forward to how long our Infinity War and our Endgame podcasts are going to be.
I'll say that's going to have to be at least 2 podcasts, if not 3.
Yeah. Woo! Especially if Samurai actually decides to show up for that one.
We're going to have a third just to go over the 2 movies and final thoughts.
But man, I think I've said enough during this podcast, so I'll let you kind of take the wheel here. Is there anything you wanted to talk about from this movie that we didn't cover? Anything that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I liked the Hulkbuster.
Yeah. Definitely a highlight for sure.
Yeah, I wish it was utilized better. I mean, the only time we see it later is the Hulk using it.
In Infinity War,
yeah. But I like that they keep finding ways to keep have the Avengers battle each other.
Yeah.
So having Wanda be the catalyst for them fighting, I liked, and they find other creative ways in the future.
Yes.
I liked, Ultron did seem like a threat, but yeah, compared to comic book bullshit, he's obviously not the same.
Yeah.
I mean, this Ultron did give me, like, the basis of what I know as the character.
Yes.
For me personally, because I'm not a big comic book fan.
Yeah.
So, even, like, going into, other games where, like, he comes in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, my basis of Ultron is this movie.
Yeah.
In that, and just seeing him being, like, a cool villain in here, like, helps me at least understand him, like, how they use him in that game.
Yeah, again, big shout out to James Spader, who I think was instrumental in making Ultron as scary and terrifying as he is. So
yeah, no, there's some genuinely, like, creepy, like, lines he does. It's pretty great. And, yeah, I found it very interesting. They make sure to have 2 Quicksilvers in 2 different universes and promptly don't keep this one. That was a very interesting tidbit that there was the whole controversy and, like, how everyone's going to get confused that there's the 2 and then they just kill off the 1 anyways. And yeah.
And a fun fact, that last scene where they show the new members of the Avengers, they shot a scene with Quicksilver there.
Really?
So his death was not originally planned.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's something that not a lot of people talk about, but they had, like, costume designs for his Avengers suit.
Oh, really?
They had plans for him, and they decided to swerve us at the last second and kill him off. And
I wonder if that was more political bullshit.
I don't know, but that's just, I think, one of my biggest gripes with this movie is...
I mean, I feel like it would almost have to be just...
There's so many decisions in here that I just look at as a fan and go, and maybe I am being too harsh, maybe, but I don't think so. I really don't. I think that every point I've made, every line of critique, I think has been backed up or justified. If not at the time, then definitely through hindsight.
And again, you being, a fan, short for fanatic, and you just love these movies so much, you can see... Again, and you still like it. You're not saying it's a terrible movie overall.
No, I still think it's a really fun ride, like you put it. It's a great ride, but man, like, you can't think about it too hard.
Yeah, but at the same time, usually, like, the most critical people like it the most.
Yeah. And, again, I think I have spent more time dunking on this movie than I did Thor: The Dark World, but I think that's just because Thor: The Dark World's just not a good movie.
Yeah.
Especially by MCU standards. Like, I've watched it back and it was better than I thought it was.
But this movie had so much more potential.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what frustrates me, is it's like, man, you have all these moving pieces, and it just feels like they throw Hydra away, they waste Ultron in a single movie instead of over, like, multiple movies. Like, he could have been, like, a recurring villain, and they could always technically still bring him back. But at this point, I feel if they did, it would just be so...
Yeah, they would have by now if they really wanted to.
Yeah, I don't feel that he has a place in the multiverse saga as it is. But that's another story. I really just wish this movie was better. And I think everyone agrees that it was a step back compared to the first Avengers movie. And I don't think that's the fault of any of the actors, who I think all knocked their roles out of the park.
Yeah, because I think just sitting down watching the movie, it's... not putting too much thought, like, just watching it in the moment, like, it feels just as good, maybe not as good as the Avengers, just because it was this whole culmination of things.
Yeah.
But it still felt good just watching it. But
it's still fun, but it's...
Yeah, having the power of hindsight with this movie,
Yeah, and especially the greater connections of the MCU and, like, the character histories and stuff. It just... Yeah. It feels like there was a lot of missed opportunities here, and... I don't know. It is interesting because you kind of see the seeds, we talked about a lot, but there's some subtle seeds where, like, the way Wanda is looking at Vision, like, like, Wanda is the one who glances over at Vision. And you can kind of see that, like, that connection that would be built up in the next couple movies would establish here, but it just feels, again, like, man, I feel they rushed the face turn of Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. I feel that Cap was very, very quick to believe Wanda and Pietro, which, again, like, is in his character, but also at the same time, like, Wanda literally just messed with your mind.
Yeah.
Like, and the mind of all of your teammates.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't you be a little more cautious?
No.
And then, yeah, Stark, I think, trying to fix his problem is very much in character, but like Bruce going along with it a second time is like really,
Yeah.
and Thor coming in and like bringing it to life, just a lot of stuff where it's like, man, it makes sense, but not as well as it could have, and certainly not to the casual viewer. It makes more sense to the hardcore fans, I think, than the casual fans.
Oh, okay.
Because it's like, again, Thor was the one who like literally almost strangled Stark when he was messing around with the Mind Stone, and then Thor comes and turns around and brings the Mind Stone to life. Like, and that whole scene where it was explained to him was cut out of the movie. So it's implied, but like to a casual fan, I would imagine if you thought about it for too long, you'd be a bit confused why Thor is all of a sudden siding with Vision and Stark. So I don't know. I just feel clunky is a good way to describe this movie. It's a bit clunky and ham-fisted, but it's still good. It's just I feel like its potential was up here, and we got a movie that was like here. That's my opinion.
Yeah, like potential was A or S.
Yeah.
And we got like a B minus or C. You know.
Which, again, not bad,
but
could have been better.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my final thoughts. Is there anything else you kind of want to wrap us up with, show on this?
We need more Hulkbuster.
Need more Hulkbuster?
Yes.
Okay.
Always need more Hulkbuster.
I can't disagree with that, so I'm glad we're ending on this on a positive note. But that's going to do it for us. Thanks for sticking with us for over an hour at this point, hour and 20 minutes of recorded time. But my name is Shenzo the Lost. He's Shoshima1016. Thank you guys very much for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.